All right, folks, it's another edition of the online dinner party. And of course, we've got some amazing guests as always. And of course, I'm coming at you from the Bull City of Durham, North Carolina. And of course, we are always glad to have amazing guests with us on a regular basis. Pepe doesn't know this, but one of the shows that I produce on a regular basis is a show called Funk from the Front Seat. And that is actually produced by a good friend of mine, Zach Robertson, who does some funk music as well. He has got a band called the Nappy Head Funk Army, but he is originally from New York as well. So I know that Pepe is from New York area, and we do that show on the Saturday afternoons around noon, and I'll have to get him on that particular show as well. But definitely, I know that Pepe is there from the Brooklyn area, spent a lot of his growing up years there in Brooklyn, and then he went to Minneapolis. And we know that there are all kinds of different sounds. People remember the TSOP sound, the sound of Philly. And of course, a lot of folks remember from the Midwest, the Motown sound. And of course, a lot of folks remember other sounds as well, including sounds that have been coming out of here, out of what folks like to call the Dirty South, and all in that kind of way. But Pepe was one of the originators of that Minneapolis sound, and he actually knew a young man that went on into all kinds of fame and fortune before his untimely death. But he was definitely a legendary figure. But he actually got his first start. Definitely want to hear this story from Pepe's own words. And I am talking about the legendary Prince and all in that space. So definitely something that has been involved in a lot of the music world and has been doing it for a number of years. So Pepe, when did you first decide that you were going to be a musician as a young man? I'm thinking that you might have
Ah,
decided as a young man, maybe you were involved, as many of our musicians were, in the church structure, or maybe you were like trying to get out of that church structure and just were trying to do some music other than the gospel music that I know is the start for many of us in society and all in that way. So, Pepe, if you'll share with our global audience a little bit about your background and what you've got going on. And like I said, I just mentioned some of the history and all in that space. And I know that from hanging out with Zach, I've learned of some of the New York spots because, like I said, I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, but went to school in Milwaukee. But I definitely have friends and family that have lived in New York, and I know he oftentimes talks about CBG or CBGY, I believe is what it's called, and all in that space. And he talks about some other popular clubs that he remembers from back in that day and everything there in New York. I love because, including one that I remember, he said that he used to work at. It was on the top of the building that was um, torn down by that horrible day on 9/11 back in 2001. But there was a club up at the top that he had done some work with at that particular
oh,
location as well.
yeah. Well, Mark, first of all, I'd like to thanks for the invite,
Yes.
and you are definitely well informed about me coming in from Brooklyn, New York, baby. Gotta represent. And as far as church is concerned, of course, if you from Brooklyn and you had a grandmother that went to church, then you better get your butt in church. And of course, I was up in there, you know, more than 3 or 4 times a week. I mean, that's how it is. That's how it works. And I met my uncle. Well, he knew me before I knew him, of
Right.
course. Mr. Clarence Collins
Hmm.
of Little Anthony and the Imperials,
Right.
Rock and Roll Hall of Famers since 2009. They got in, and one day, because my mom and dad were separated, my mom lived up in Bushwick part of Brooklyn, and I lived in Bed-Stuy part of Brooklyn. So I have 4 sisters, and one of my sisters, or 2 of them, used to come and live with my dad, for the weekend, and then my mom or someone would pick them up. So I remember distinctively, I was 10 years old, and my uncle Clarence Collins comes to pick up one of my sisters.
Hmm.
And I had heard his music on the radio, Tears on My Pillow. And he came over, and I looked at him, and I was in like shock. And
Hmm.
I said, wow, I said, this is my uncle, my mother's brother, and I went to, he was 17 at the time, and I was 10. And I said to him, you sing with little Anthony and the Imperials? And he was a smart ass, 17 years old. Yes, I sing with little Anthony and the Imperials. And then I just thought it was amazing. And in school, after we would come out of school at 3 o'clock, we go to the candy store. We hit the candy store, buy all the candy and everything. And the candy store owner had a radio playing. And the music would come up, tears on my pillow, and I would go, oh man, I said, that's my uncle. My uncle was singing with that group. And this one girl, she was bigger than me and stuff. She says, oh, that's not your uncle. And I said, yes, it is. It's my uncle. And she pushed me and stuff and chased me all the way home.
Well,
So I never even said that again. And I was only like 10 or 11 around that time. But 5 years later, I was 15. And I asked my mom, I said, Mom, I want to go to the rock and roll show that my uncle was in. They was at the Brooklyn Paramount Theater. And she says, well, maybe Clarence will take you. And he goes like, yeah, I'll take him. So, my first time, at a rock and roll show. And I knew nothing. I knew nothing about fans. I knew nothing about groupies. All I knew is that the music that I heard on the radio, some of them stars are going to be there at that show, And I went there with him, and I can get backstage and everything. So it was awesome. And then I was up in the Imperial's dressing room, and my uncle says, hey, Pepe, he says, why don't you go and knock on some of these other artists' doors and see if they want anything from the store. Oh, okay. And one of the first artists I knocked on the door was Mr. Chubby Checker.
Oh, wow.
Mr. Twist. And I knocked on his door, and he goes, yeah, come on in. And I go in, and I said, I just want to know if you want something from the store, because I was in awe, man. I'm just 15. And he goes like, yeah, man. He says, he gave me some money. He says, go pick me up a pack of Salem cigarettes, I'm like, oh, okay. And this is in the 60s,
Right.
I come out the stage door, and they had these police lines and, all of these fans behind there. And every time that stage door would open, people would go, ah, they would scream, ah, and it was just me coming out. Then they look at me and go, ah, and I'd go to the store, and I'd come back, and I knock on the stage door for the guard to let me in. And somebody from the group behind the police line that says, after the guard opens the door, hey, how come he can go in and out when he wants to? And me, like an idiot, I said, oh, I just went to get Chubby Checker these cigarettes. And it was pandemonium, baby. The police line broke down. They started charging me. They're trying to get these cigarettes. I don't know why, and they ripped my shirt, and the guard had to pull me in the door. And that was the first time that I was involved with fans, groupies, or whatever you want to call them. And I learned my lesson.
I know. I'm sure that taught you big time. You got to be careful with those fans and those groupies. There's no telling
No
what they might
kidding.
want. And I know that sometimes, because I've worked and had the pleasure of working at the Bull Durham Blues Festival, which has been on hiatus for a number of years, partially because of the pandemic, but other factors as well and everything. But hopefully they'll be coming back, if not this year, in the near future. But I do know that sometimes the stars can want interesting things on their riders. They might have certain things that they have in mind in terms of their eating desires, in terms of
Right.
vegetarian or other kinds of foods that they want, or they might want a certain kind of cigarette or a certain kind of liquor
Yeah.
and all of that. So I do know that they can add some interesting things to the riders, and I'm sure that you even saw that as a performer yourself as well. So I'm sure that there are some
Absolutely.
artists that you saw that might have had some unusual things, like a particular brand of cigar that they wanted, or a particular type
Yeah.
of beer that they wanted. It might not even have been in the town that they were performing at, which could make it very interesting that you had to try to track it down if it was something that.
Right. Absolutely. I remember distinctively that next year, Murray Decay, who was a top DJ in New York, was given these shows, and we moved over to the Brooklyn Fox Theater. So now we at the Brooklyn Fox, the whole Motown Review is there. You know, you got Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Mary Wells, Martha and the Vandellas, the Four Tops, the Original Temptations, Smokey and the Miracles. I mean, everybody, the Marvelettes. I mean, everybody was there. And then my uncle's group, of course, Little Anthony and the Imperials, Wayne Newton, the Ronettes, the Chiffons, the Shirelles. What's the other one? I can't remember. Oh, yeah, the Ronettes and Wayne Newton.
Okay.
Oh, Timmy Euro.
Mm-hmm.
Timmy Euro, who sang, I'm so hurt to think that you lied to me. You know, she sent me to the store to get her a box of dishes.
Oh, wow.
You know, that was kind of unusual because I usually got like food, you know, or something to drink or desserts or whatever. And she says, no, I want you to go find me some dishes. Oh, I scratched my head, man. I went, okay. So I walked down Fulton Street in Brooklyn, and they had all these stores. They all lined up, and you find anything you want in New York, you know?
Right.
So I'm walking down the street, and I see boxes of dishes outside of this store. And I go inside, and I said, yeah, I want a box of these dishes, cups, saucers, you know, plates, whatever. And he gives them to me. I pay him the money. It was real cheap. I go back to the theater. I go up to her dressing room. I knock on the door and I says, oh, this was, it wasn't Timmy Euro. It was Dusty Springfield, son of a preacher man, Dusty Springfield. So I knock on her door. She comes out. I give her the dishes, and how I made my money, she just keep the change and everything like that. So I was always a guy, 15, 16 years old, always had $100 in my pocket, you know? So now I go back up to the Imperial's room, and all of a sudden we hear this crashing, crash, 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 crash. Everybody comes out of the dressing room going like, what's going on? You know, it was Dusty Springfield. She had these dishes and she was throwing them against the wall in the hallway. Just crash, crash. And everybody goes, what's she doing? What's she doing? And I go like, why are you doing this? You know, and she goes like, well, this is how I relieve tension.
Okay.
We just bought a box of dishes just to crash them against the wall.
Just to crash them and break against the wall. So
yeah, unbelievable. I mean, Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells was there. Dionne Warwick was there. And I'm seeing these acts at the beginning of their careers.
Right, at the beginning of the career. You just mentioned you saw Stevie Wonder at the beginning of his career when he was a little Stevie. What was that like, and what was it like having that interaction with people like Stevie Wonder and Martha and the Vandellas? I know, and as far as I know, I think she still lives here in the area, but one of those members of Martha and the Vandellas was a young lady named Jason Epps, and I know that Jason has moved down to this area and has been here for a while and all of that, but I was just wondering, what is it like interaction with those folks? Because I know
well, I'm gonna tell you, Martha and the Vandellas, my uncle was dating one of the Vandellas.
Okay.
He also was dating one of the Shirelles.
Okay.
He also was dating one of the Chiffons. Okay. You know, I mean, these guys got around. Berry Gordy had told the Supremes, I don't want you girls hanging out with those Imperials, man. He had to come and snatch Diana Ross from a party that they had. But in any event, Stevie Wonder actually dated my sister for a while, my younger sister. Okay. You know, and it was like puppy love, you know, they just young, you know, all that type of stuff. But she goes around going, yeah, I stayed at Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder's my boyfriend, you know, whatever. But it was one day, Stevie was playing Fingertips on the stage at the Brooklyn Fox Theater, and he's playing. I'm in the wings and I'm watching them and everything, and then all the other acts, they watching Stevie Wonder and stuff. All of a sudden, he starts jumping up and down, and then he falls into the orchestra pit. What? Just falls. I'm going, oh my God. I'm going, little Stevie Wonder just fell in the orchestra pit. And I look around, you know, seeing if anybody's going to help him. And they were all laughing. I'm going like, what is wrong with you? I said, this guy's blind. they thought it was the most funniest thing that they ever seen. I mean, he wasn't hurt or anything like
Right.
that, but nevertheless, he had fell in there. One other incident, Wayne Newton had out Donkey Shane, darling Donkey Shane. He had that out. And the Ronettes, be my baby. So the Ronettes came out and they had on these hot mini skirts. And they were singing that song and they were shaking that thing, man, and the audience was going crazy. They're going like that. So they go off. Murray Decay comes out and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, now I'd like to introduce the next act, Mr. Wayne Newton. The crowd, from Brooklyn, they went, boom. I mean, they booed Wayne Newton. I felt so bad for him. So he had to come out and he had to sing Donkey Shane, and the audience they didn't even go for that at all. So, and we did about 4 or 5 shows a day because there
Right.
were lines around the corner and stuff. And so the next show that they did, Wayne Newton came out before the Ronettes.
Right.
Oh, so it made sense,
Yeah,
you
that
know.
makes sense. Is you ain't trying to follow the that whole system of the Ronettes or somebody that's that popular. I know we did that
Right.
at the Blues Festival one year. I forgot who it was. It might have been Buddy Guy, and we had a folk singer, actually a well-known folk singer. I think it was Odetta or somebody that was the
Oh
following
yeah.
act, but they did not work because a lot of times if you've already got that feel of what you want from the popular artist and everything, no matter how famous or how well known you are, sometimes the audience is going to determine how they feel about those acts
Oh
that are
yeah,
coming on.
absolutely. And nobody see Little Anthony and the Imperials. Nobody could follow them.
Mm-mm.
Not the Temptations, not the Four Tops, not the Miracles. They could. So the Little Anthony and Imperials always closed the show
Okay.
because they were dancers. They did splits. They did everything on the song called "I'm All Right." I mean, you can look it up on some of the old stuff. The Little Anthony Imperials doing "I'm All Right," and the Temptation didn't do no splits. The Four Tops didn't do no splits. Miracles didn't do no splits. The Temptation Walk. How they did that and
Right.
stuff, spun around a little bit and everything. But they couldn't follow. So the Imperials would used to send me to the Four Tops rooms or the Temptations room and ask them what colors that they were wearing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I go to the Four Tops room and I said, hey, the Imperials want to know what colors you guys are using on this next show. They said, oh, we're going to wear blue, you know. And I go back up to the Imperials dressing room. I said, the Tops are wearing blue, guys. And then Sammy from the Imperials, he would go like, okay, we're going to wear white and we're going to kill them, and that was the only competition that these guys had against each other. You know what I mean? There was no arguing, there was no fussing, there was nothing like that. It was just when you on stage, then we're gonna leave that stage hot. So
Right.
you come out there, you better be wearing some asbestos shoes or asbestos sneakers because we're gonna leave it hot, man. I mean, and that's what it was. And then after the shows, and this is what made me get into the business. After the shows, I mean, everybody would come into the hallways and they'd be singing gospel songs,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, it blew my mind. I'm going like, well, wait a minute. I said, first of all, how did they know these songs?
Right.
And then second of all, it was like white, black, you know, everybody singing and it was like a party.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. We went out to lunches, we went out to dinners, and I was so young, I had to keep my ears open and my mouth shut,
Right.
and just learn about the business and just learn. And that's what it was all about. And that's
No,
what
yeah.
got me into it. And I said, because I seen everybody getting along and I went like, this is the business that I want to get into.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know that one of the people that also lives here in the Carolinas is a gentleman by the name of Ken Knox, who is one of the founders, along with the general of chairman of the board, and although he
Yeah,
based that whole sound is kind of known as beach music or Southern soul or a number of
yeah,
other names
chairman of
that
the
it's got.
board.
Yeah, so he's actually here in this area and still performing and everything. And one thing that I've observed with a lot of those old performers, because you still got the stylistics out there and you still got the
Yeah,
Temptations, the Four Tops, is that they had a certain kind of style about them. So that whole fashion statement that you were just kind of alluding to, it was kind of their calling card. So just wondering
right. That
how
was
much of
right.
that was their calling card, and do you think that that is something that we have lost in the music business? Because I don't see the stars always dressing the way that they did back in
Yeah,
the
it's
60s and
lost.
70s.
It's lost now. I mean, girls are coming out with, sexy gear and all that, and guys are just coming out with anything they want,
Right.
what they wear on the street. But like I remember Lou Anthony and Imperials, I was painting that they wore gloves. They had these gloves and they glowed in the dark.
Mhm.
They always had these gimmicks and things like that or what they would wear. And they would come out and the stage would be dark. And all you see is these white gloves coming out, coming out. And then Anthony, the light will come on him and he's singing and stuff. And then when the Imperials part come in, the lighting guy who was cued, boom, lights on the Imperials, and the audience they would go crazy.
Mm.
It was performance, it was art, they all had different kinds of uniforms and stage gear and stuff, that they didn't wear this on the street.
Right.
When they finish their performance, they come to the dressing room, they wiping the sweat and makeup and all this stuff off their face, and they put on their regular clothes to go outside.
Yeah,
And
that
that's
makes
how
sense.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Entertainment.
I noticed it in the 60s and the 70s to some degree. Those were some very turbulent times, but I know that a lot of my musician friends talk about how music is out there and is a very unifying factor. So even if there were things going on like the civil rights struggle and like the
Right.
war against Vietnam and a number of other things, people would sometimes turn to music to one, bring the issues to light, but also to kind of like unify us no matter what the race or creed or whatever else was
Right.
in that sense and
Absolutely.
everything. So, how important do you think music is just in your own life in being a unifying factor?
Oh yeah, it definitely is, and it always has been.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember a friend of mine who was a pilot
Mm-hmm.
for in Vietnam,
Right.
and he told my uncle, he said it was your music
Mm-hmm.
that helped me through, being in the service.
Right.
As he's bombing, these people over in Vietnam and stuff. And as you know, uh, we knew the lyrics of these songs.
Mm-hmm.
We sang these songs, man. We had groups that would be on the street corner,
Mm-hmm.
doing ooh, blah, 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 and singing and everything. And it brought everybody together. I used to walk, down the street of Brooklyn or something and see some guys singing, and I would stop and
Mm-hmm.
listen to him and find me a note. I found me a note, woo, whatever, just to get in there. You know what I mean? And
Right.
they go like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It brought so many people together. It was just unbelievable. And it taught me a lesson, like you were saying, in unification,
Mm-hmm.
when I would see all of these artists singing together gospel songs. And that brought me to the forefront. I went like, wow. I said, you know, I wanted to get along with everybody.
Right.
Even though I lived in the hood, I wanted to get along. I had white friends, I had black friends and stuff. There were gangs and stuff that you had to get into in order to survive, in order to live, to make it through. I remember the first time I stepped in a white person's house,
Mm-hmm.
in Brooklyn. I mean, my friends, they lived down the street from where I lived at, and we played all the time. And at one time they said, well, Pepe, come on, let's go. And I went and I'm running and we're having fun. And then they go in their house and then they say, come on. And I went, and I stopped right at the door.
Wow.
The door was open. I stopped, man. I couldn't go in. I'd never been in a white person's house before. And it was different, man. You look around, they got cups and saucers and plates and spoons, all we had is cups maybe, yeah, or jelly jars or whatever. So it was different, and they would say, come on in, come on in. And I would walk in real slow or something like that, and I don't know why, it just was in my brain just to stop, man. You just can't go walking into some white folks' home, it was crazy, man. But, like you said, the music brought us all together,
Yeah,
and that was it. That was the
I can
key.
definitely see that. But I also noted there was a lot of those freedom songs that also became very popular as well. And a lot of people were singing those on the streets as well, whether it was like
Absolutely.
the Negro National Anthem or Lift Every Voice and Sing or a number of other
Right.
songs that would be
Absolutely.
used as part of those 60s protests and everything. So I just wondered if that was
Right.
something that you paid attention to as well, because I know that even Martin Luther King and some of the other civil rights leaders would have some amazing singers that would be singing and kind of getting involved with their movement. I think that's part of the
That's
reason that
right.
Stevie
Yeah.
Wonder wanted to get that birthday song for him and
Yeah,
everything in that
absolutely.
space.
Yeah. And I met Adam Clayton Powell. Adam
Wow.
Clayton Powell had came to one of the shows. Matter of fact, it was when Little Anthony Imperials was at the Copacabana.
Okay.
And he came up there. I'm drinking champagne with Adam Clayton Powell. I'm going like, wow, and having a lot of fun, man. I met Ike and Tina Turner. I met Jimi Hendrix. I met Elvis, and all of these people. But to me, it was okay. It
Yeah.
was like it was family to me because I grew up in the business.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
What was
yeah.
it like meeting Jimi Hendrix? And like I said, I mentioned earlier that you were the ones that, well, one of the people that discovered Prince and got him involved in that whole Minneapolis sound. And I definitely want to learn more about that. But a lot of people have compared Jimmy to Prince in the sense of who the greats were and who was the best ones. And I know that on some of the
Mhm.
lists, the two of them are both at the top of the list of great musicians and all of that. But I was just wondering, what was your thoughts about that comparison and whether you saw some of the similarities in their styles?
Well, I saw well, when I met, let me just get this. I met Jimi Hendrix at a party.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my uncle had asked me right after a show at the Copacabana. He says, "Do you want to go to a party?" And I went like, "Yeah, okay, cool." So it was in walking distance from the Copa. It was in Manhattan. And we go up and get into this elevator where you had to pull down the rope for the doors to close like this, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was dusty. And it was, in there. We're clean, man. And I'm, and I'm going like, what kind of party is my uncle taking me to with this dirty, elevator? So we push the button. It goes up to the floors. And when the doors open, I I was like, it was like, oh man. I mean, they had aquariums, good lighting, couches, bars. I mean, lights all over the place. The place was immaculate and music and people dancing. And I went like, wow, what? Oh, wow, man, I loved it. And I was smiling. And then we go in, we found a place to sit down. And I'm sitting on this couch and I'm just in awe of this place and I'm looking around. And then I see Jimi Hendrix. I elbowed my uncle. He goes, what, man, what? I said, man, Jimi Hendrix is over there. He goes, where? I said, right over there. So he stands up, he looks and he goes, hey, Jimmy. Jimmy turns around and goes, hey, Clarence, man, what's up, man? They knew each other. They were tight. He told me, he said he knew Jimi Hendrix when Jimi Hendrix was carrying his guitar in a pillowcase.
Oh, wow.
I was like in awe. So Jimmy comes over and we're talking. He introduces me to Jimi Hendrix. I got to shake his hand, man. And his hands were so long. I mean, it just wrapped around mine and, and we talked and I'm just looking at this guy in awe, and they're talking. So then Jimi Hendrix sees this girl, and he
Mhm.
says, "Excuse me for a minute." He goes over to this girl. He whispers in her ear, and I'm watching him the whole time. Boom, they're gone. He's out the door. He's gone. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. You know, now Prince is another story. Prince is, uh, I met Prince's first cousin, Chantel,
Mhm.
at the Copacabana.
Okay.
Sammy Strain, who was one of the Imperials, who later on became an OJ,
Mhm.
and he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice as an OJ and as an Imperial. So they finished the show. Sammy comes up to the dressing room, and I'm working for these guys as a valet.
Right.
And Sammy says, "Hey, Pepe." And I go, "Yeah, man." And I'm taking off his jacket, hanging it up, giving him a towel to wipe the sweat off. He says, "Who's that girl out there with the green eyes?" Now, Mark, this has always intrigued me. I don't know why, but I said, "Oh, that's my girlfriend, man." I didn't know her.
Yeah.
I never met her in my life, right?
Uh-huh.
But I knew if I said that that was my girlfriend, that Sammy wouldn't even mess with her,
Right.
or any other guys wouldn't mess with her out of respect. So now I get finished hanging up all these guys' clothes. I go out into the waiting room, and I'm looking around all these girls, and I had to find this girl with the green eyes, and I found her. And I
Okay.
sat down next to her, and I says, "Hi, my name is Pepe." She goes, "Oh, I'm Chantel." And I says, "Well, who you here to see?" She says, "Well, I'm here with my aunt Kalua." And I knew Kalua because she
Okay.
was dating my uncle.
Okay.
And I said, "Well, then we can hang out then." And she goes like, "Yeah." I said, "Do you have a curfew? Do you have to be in it?" She goes, "No, I don't." She got offended. She goes, "No, I ain't got no curfew. I ain't, I, I can hang out." And that's how I met her. And we hung out, we fell in love, man, out of years and years and years and stuff. She would come in from Minneapolis and come to Brooklyn, and we hang out, we go to concerts. I can always talk my way into a club or someplace and stuff. And one day, I got out of the service. I got drafted by the Army. I got out in 1970, and instead of me going back to New York, I went to Minneapolis,
Okay.
and she introduced me to Prince at one of her cousin's house or aunt's house. And Prince was 12 years old.
Okay.
So I didn't pay him no mind.
Mhm.
To me, he was like 8 years old because
Right.
he was little. I'm all like, okay. He's wrestling on the floor with his cousin Charles and everything. So I had to go back to New York because to get my job with New York Telephone Company.
Right.
So I went back to New York, and Prince had called me up in 1973. It's 3 years later. Now his cousin would come in back and forth to New York and everything.
Right.
And now we were married because I asked her to marry after I got out of the service, went back to New York. We got married. Now Prince calls me up in 1973 to ask me about publishing.
Mhm.
Because his cousin had told him, if you want to know about the music industry, you better call Pepe because Pepe knows everything about the music business that you ever want to know. So he calls me up and he asked me, and I said, "Well, Prince," I says, uh, it's hard for me to explain this to you over the phone, but I'm coming to Minneapolis. And when I get there, I'll sit down with you and I'll explain the whole business thing to you." And he says, "Okay, okay, okay." So in 1974, I go to Minneapolis. Now,
Mhm.
my father-in-law, who Eddie Mandeville, Chantel's dad, had a ski club,
Mhm.
and he had a party. He had a ski party after skiing. And the band that was playing was Grand Central,
Okay.
with Prince on guitar, Andre Simone on bass, Linda
Mhm.
Anderson, Andre's sister on keyboards, William Dowdy on percussion, and Morris Day playing drums.
Right.
you know. So I'm at the party, and this woman kept looking at me, and I'm going like, "Dang!" So why this? I don't understand why this lady's looking at me all the time. She's just looking at me. I can't. Everywhere I go, she's looking and looking. So I finally go over to her and I go, "Hi, my name is Pepe." She goes, "Yes, my name is Levon, and I want to know how you like the group." And I'm going like, they were playing Earth, Wind, and Fire tunes and cover songs. And I said, "Well, I like the group very good. They're good." And she goes like, "Well, would you want to work with them?" I'm going like, "Do I want to work? Okay, yeah, sure, I'll work with them. And she says, "Good." Now, I didn't know this, but somebody had told the band and her that some big time producer was coming to check them out in New York. Now, from New York. I didn't know it was me.
Okay.
I had no idea. So now we set up rehearsals at Morris Day's house, with the band. So I started working with them. They played their first song, which Prince wrote, called Sex Machine. And the song lasted like 10, 15 minutes. I go like, "Whoa, wait a minute, man. This can't happen." I said, "Radio's only allowing you 3 minutes or 3 minutes and 30 seconds, for a song to be played on the radio. That's all the time you got." So I gave them this formula for 3 minute, 3:30 song. I gave them this formula, how to write songs for radio. And I taught all these guys this. I made them put down their instruments. I wrote the lyrics on the blackboard on any original song that they did so that everybody knew what they were singing or what they were saying. I talked to them about business. I talked to them about production. I talked to them about publishing. I talked to them about writing. I talked to them about radio and how you got paid and performance rights organizations and unions and all of this type of stuff. And one day at a rehearsal, Prince had went over to Linda and asked her, "Let me play your keyboard for a minute. This is what I want you to play." And he's playing these keyboards. So I'm looking at him and I'm going like, "Okay, Prince plays guitar and he plays keyboards." I said, "Okay, that's cool. Yeah." So then they play a little bit, then he stops and he goes, "Andre, let me hold your bass." Now, Andre disputes this, but this is the only way that I knew that Prince played multiple instruments. And this is why Andre, you're mistaken, man, because, this is how I knew. So Prince takes Andre's bass, and he starts thumping. "Andre, this is what I want you to play." And he's thumping. And Andre got it, okay, cool. And I'm in awe. I'm going like, okay, he plays keyboards, he plays guitar, and he plays bass. So after the rehearsal, I asked him, I said, "Prince," I said, "have you ever been in a recording studio before?" He goes like, "No." I said, "Well, I'm in the studio right now with my band 94 East, and I want you to play with us." And he says, "Okay, cool." And I gave him a tape of 5 songs that we were doing that are now called the Cookhouse 5. Prince's first recordings in studio, playing electric guitar with us. I took him down to the Musicians Union, got him signed up. And of course, if I'm teaching these guys the business, then I had to pay them. You know what I mean? And I didn't let them just go in and say, "Hey, yeah, thanks a lot." No, I paid these guys, and this is how it all started. And I took those songs, Cookhouse 5, went to New York from Minneapolis and got signed with Polydor and working with Hank Cosby. Hank Cosby produced and co-wrote My Sharia Moore and For Once in My Life with Stevie Wonder. And now I'm co-producing with him, And he wrote this song for us called Fortune Teller. And I wrote this one song called 1015. And we were going into Sound 80 to record our single. And we see Prince. Prince comes in, he says, "What are you guys doing here?" I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm just finishing up my demo." Because while I was in New York, he was with Owen Husney and Chris Moon. He had just met those people when I came in from New York getting signed. And he told me, he said, "Yeah, I want you to meet these people. They're cool, blah, 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 blah." And I was always looking out for his protection. So I said, "Okay, that's why he said, I want you to meet these people, make sure that they're okay." Because I never had any problems with Prince whatsoever. He listened to everything. He did everything that I asked of him and stuff. There was never a why or whatever. If I said, Prince, you got to do this. Okay, boom, he did it. Prince,
Wow.
your manager, he's no good. He's out. Okay, I mean, that's the way it was. We were tight. So he wanted to play on our session,
Hmm.
and I said, okay, yeah, cool. So we asked Hank. We said, Hank, man, we got this other guitar player, Prince. We want him to play guitar, on our session. He goes, okay, good. So he sang background vocals on Fortune Teller with Marcy and Christy, and he played guitar, electric guitar with the rest of the band. And that was the first time. That was the second time he was in the studio, or the third time, I should say, that he was in the studio. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Well, I
we
know.
worked, we did over 12 or 13 songs that I've written. And I co-wrote one with him called Just Another Sucker. I got another song called Do Yourself a Favor
Mhm.
that's on his 1999 remastered album, deluxe album.
Right.
That's, and the original name is If You See Me, but it's also Do Yourself a Favor. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that song, If You See Me and everything. Now, one of the things that Prince was known for, and I was just curious your thoughts about it, is that he did get very frustrated with the music industry. That's part of the reason of his doing that whole thing with the symbol and all in that kind of space. But I just wondering, and you're the one that taught him about the music business, if you think that the music business got as bad as I get the impression he thought it was, because he definitely was encouraging a lot of our artists to try to be independent of the
Right.
system and all of that. And we have seen that happen. And a lot of the newer artists are out there on Reverb Nation or out there releasing their own music and not dependent as much on radio airplay.
Label. Yeah. Now, yeah. What happened was Prince had signed one of his biggest deals with Warner Brothers,
Mhm.
and for 100 million, and 5-year contract, $20 million, a year for him to get to up to 1 million. And what had happened was when they gave him the first $20 million, everything was cool. So Prince did another album,
Mhm.
and he took it to Warner's, and he goes like, okay, where's my next 20 million? And they says, oh, no, no, no. He says, well, what has to happen? You have to sell 5 million copies of your album in order to get the next 20 million.
Mhm.
So Prince goes, okay. He did an audit.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know the exact numbers, but we'll just say it was 3,500,000 that Prince had, or let's go 4 million albums Prince said that he sold.
Right.
Right? Warner Brothers said, no, you only sold 3.5 million,
Mhm.
you know. So there was a discrepancy there,
Right.
And so he didn't like it.
Mhm.
His audit told him he sold more. Warner Brothers said he sold less. So now he didn't trust him.
Right.
So he wrote Slave on his face,
Mhm.
you know, and that's when he started this campaign of owning your own masters,
Right.
changing his name to a symbol
Mhm.
so that he can operate under that symbol without having to deal with Warner Brothers,
Right.
you know, and that's how it all worked out. Now I don't know why later on in his years he went back to Warner Brothers, but evidently they had straightened it out,
Gotcha.
because I mentored Prince for like 12 years. And after I felt that he had a career in the business,
Mhm.
then I left. I just gone like, okay, he wanted me to stay, but I couldn't anymore because he started changing.
Okay.
I mean, of course, the student now has outgrown the teacher,
Right.
you know, and it was just, I love him. I always supported him, and but it was time for me to back off and stuff, just to leave. Now, during the filming of Purple Rain, which I'm in Purple Rain also, they cut one of my biggest parts, but when Prince sings Purple Rain and he goes back to the dressing room, I'm one of the people standing in the hallway as he passes and goes back to the dressing room. So at the wrap of that film, Prince and Morris Day had this big argument. So I'm sitting there and I'm going like, man, you guys need to cut this out, man. And then Prince is telling Morris, you owe me, man, you owe me, because Prince had produced his stuff, with the time and wrote it and stuff. And so Morris has says, I owe you. He said, if anybody owes anybody anything, Prince, you owe Pepe. And I turn around and I go, why are you putting my name into your stuff, man? I'm not in it. I mean, because listen, I never asked Prince for not one dime.
Yeah. So you didn't ask him for one dime, huh? Oh, did you freeze over there? I think he might have frozen. Pepe, can you hear me? I think Pepe's frozen. I hate when these people freeze. Pepe, you might have to go out and come back because this froze. I'll put it in chat. Hold on. What's going on here? Well, I can see me, but he's frozen. Pepe, it looks like you froze, so I'm going to do something different. Hold on. There. Yeah. Oh, wait. Maybe the machine. Hey, the technology doesn't want to work. Aha, that's what it was. It was. No, Pepe. Anyway.